Shirai Ryu. For the Lin Kuei. You made it.
You know I don't watch him fight anymore.
Ah, well. Opposition left to fight. We will already. That's pretty cool.
No. Name's Jax. See you around, champ.
It's snowing.
Chosen? For what?
Take the truck. Get your family to safety.
I should go.
Rules set in stone by the Elder Gods.
Leave the... You guys are...
The target had the same marking you do, Cole. It's an invitation to fight. There's more to this, Cole.
Actually, that's kind of a funny story. Come on! Hey, you got it.
Rain lashes against the cracked concrete of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Earthrealm. Smoke curls from a burning dumpster, casting shadows that twist like living creatures across the walls. Cole Young's fists are bloodied, knuckles split, yet his eyes are drawn not to the pain, but to the figure stepping out from the shadows. Jax Briggs, his metal arms gleaming even under the dim light. There's a tension here that thrums through the air, an unspoken warning. Something ancient has stirred. Cole doesn't know why he's here. He doesn't know why the mark on his chest burns whenever someone mentions Mortal Kombat. But the fear in Jax's eyes tells him it's real. Somewhere, far above and below, unseen forces are watching, waiting, and soon the game begins. Silence. Then the first roar of combat echoes from a distance, promising blood, betrayal, and a destiny he can't escape. Cole follows Jax through a labyrinth of rain-slicked alleys, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Neon signs flicker overhead, their buzzing light illuminating symbols etched into the walls. Arcane, threatening, ancient. The city seems alive, whispering warnings in the wind, and Cole's chest burns with an urgency he can't explain. "You've been chosen," Jax finally says, voice low, almost trembling. Cole wants to ask who chose him, but before the words escape, a shadow detaches from a darkened doorway, Scorpion. Flame dances around his skeletal mask, eyes burning with fury. He points, silent, commanding. No words, just heat and intent. And in that moment, Cole realizes this is bigger than survival. This is destiny, a brutal test where every choice leaves a scar on body and soul. The knight is alive with the promise of combat, and he is already running out of time. Cole stumbles through the burning remnants of a warehouse fight, limbs trembling yet mind razor-sharp. He can still hear the echo of Scorpion's chains, feel the heat of his wrath lingering in the smoky air. Jax's metallic arms slam against the concrete as they fight their way through shadowy corridors, each impact sending tremors that reverberate through Cole's bones. The mark on his chest pulses, pain mixed with a strange warmth, an invitation and a curse. Somewhere deep, a memory not his own flickers, visions of warriors, realms, and battles that predate his existence. He shakes it off, forced to focus. Above, the storm rages. Below, the darkness seems to breathe. And then, a whisper in the wind, a name, Sub-Zero. Cole freezes. The chill that follows isn't from the rain. It's something older, colder, watching, waiting, ready to strike. Every step forward drags him closer to the edge of destiny he's not ready to face, yet cannot escape. The ground shakes violently as the battle intensifies, sending shards of concrete and metal flying in every direction. Cole's heart pounds like a war drum, each beat a countdown to confrontation. Faces blur, fists strike, and yet he feels the world bending around him. Jax shouts warnings, but the roar of Scorpion's flames and Sub-Zero's ice drowns everything else. Suddenly, an ally appears where none should, a mysterious figure, cloaked, stepping between them, deflecting attacks with a precision that makes Cole question reality itself. Who is this stranger, and why do they know him? The corridors twist unnaturally, as if the city itself bends to the will of unseen masters. Cole realizes the fight is no longer just for survival. It is for understanding, for a truth that could shatter everything he believes. And somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, a signal that the true challenge is about to begin. Shang Tsung's presence poisons the air before Cole even sees him. The candles bend away from his shadow. The warriors around Cole feel it too. Sonya's jaw tightens, Kano stops joking, and Liu Kang's flames flicker low, like even fire is afraid. Raiden's temple is supposed to be safe, but safety suddenly feels like a lie. Outworld has already begun cheating, hunting champions before the tournament can start. Cole looks at the others and realizes every marked fighter is a target, every breath borrowed. Then Sub-Zero appears beyond the stone gates, frost crawling across the ground like death with patience. He has not come for everyone. His eyes lock onto Cole, and Cole's blood turns cold. Sub-Zero moves like a nightmare given flesh. One step, and the temple floor turns white. Another, and Cole's breath becomes smoke. Jax charges first, metal arms roaring, but ice explodes around him and throws him back like a broken machine. Sonya fires. Liu Kang unleashes flame. Nothing stops him. Then Cole sees it, his family, trapped in frozen silence, Sub-Zero using them as bait. Something inside Cole snaps. Not fear, not anger, something older. His armor bursts from his skin, golden and alive, absorbing every blow meant to destroy him. For the first time, he does not run. But Sub-Zero smiles behind the mask because he knows the bloodline Cole carries. The name falls like a blade, Hanzo Hasashi. Cole is not just chosen. He is the last spark of a murdered legacy. And when Sub-Zero raises his frozen dagger, hell answers first. Scorpion tears through the fire behind him, chains screaming, eyes burning with centuries of grief. Get over here. The words hit like judgment. Flame meets ice. Rage meets cruelty. Cole fights beside his ancestor, not as a scared cage fighter, but as a protector. Together they break Sub-Zero's cold dominion, and when the ice finally melts, Cole's family breathes again. But victory is not peace. Shang Tsung retreats, promising more killers. Raiden gathers the champions. The war has only opened its eyes. The 2021 reboot of Mortal Kombat takes the franchise into a darker, grittier territory, and it all starts with the hands guiding the vision, director Simon McQuoid. McQuoid was a relative newcomer in feature filmmaking when he was tapped for the project, but he came with a distinct pedigree in commercials and short-form storytelling, known for visually bold, kinetic sequences. What drew him to this universe was not just nostalgia for the franchise, but the challenge of turning a beloved, often cartoonish video game into a cinematic experience that could resonate with modern audiences while still honoring the brutal, blood-soaked legacy fans expect. Early on, McQuoid emphasized his desire to give each fight sequence a unique personality, ensuring that combat became a narrative language rather than mere spectacle. McQuoid's approach leaned heavily on a visual-first mentality. He treated each battle like a character study, believing that how someone moves in combat reveals who they are. This vision is evident in the way the film's opening sequences immediately differentiate the warriors. Cole Young's training is grounded, sweaty, and brutal in a way that feels lived in, while Sub-Zero's attacks are swift, almost surgical, exuding cold precision. McQuoid collaborated closely with his stunt coordinator and fight choreographers, insisting that every motion be physically meaningful. The result is a fight landscape that doesn't just look exciting. It communicates psychology, hierarchy, and stakes without relying on exposition. The film's studio backing also played a crucial role in shaping McQuoid's creative freedom. Warner Brothers provided the kind of budget and production infrastructure that allowed the blending of practical effects and CGI, a balance McQuoid considered vital. From the blood-splattered fatalities to the sweeping arenas of Outworld, the resources were leveraged to push boundaries of visual intensity. Interestingly, McQuoid chose to work with a production design team that favored tactile realism. Textures mattered, the weight of weapons felt tangible, and every environment suggested a history that extended beyond the frame. Even the choice to set part of the narrative in Midway City, a nod to the franchise's classic roots, was filtered through a lens of grounded realism, giving a sense that these extraordinary fighters inhabited a world that felt lived in. One of the more compelling aspects of McQuoid's vision is his treatment of mythology. Mortal Kombat isn't just a fighting game. It's a multiverse of lore. And he was acutely aware that overloading viewers with exposition would risk turning the film into a manual rather than a story. Instead, he allowed characters and environments to whisper their histories. Raiden's blue lightning, Liu Kang's disciplined movements, and Shang Tsung's transformative abilities all become storytelling shorthand, letting audiences intuitively grasp roles and stakes without long-winded explanations. This is where McQuoid's commercial background shines. He knows how to tell a story in snapshots using images and gestures to convey depth in moments too brief for dialogue alone. Collaboration extended beyond visuals. McQuoid cultivated a directorial atmosphere that encouraged actors to experiment, particularly in fight sequences. He frequently rehearsed with them for hours in advance, discussing not just choreography but emotional intention, ensuring every punch carried narrative weight. This methodology echoes auteurist practices, where a director's fingerprints are visible in every frame, yet it also underscores a team-driven ethic. Stunts, visual effects, and performance were interdependent, a choreography of multiple disciplines aligned to a single vision. McQuoid also demonstrated a commitment to thematic resonance. At its core, the film wrestles with identity, lineage, and the burden of legacy, a natural fit for a franchise that has long centered on inherited martial prowess. Cole Young's arc, from a reluctant fighter to embracing his destiny as a Lin Kuei descendant, mirrors the audience's journey from outsider to insider within this universe. McQuoid's framing choices, often placing Cole in shadowed or confined spaces during moments of doubt, visually echo the internal struggle, reinforcing that the stakes extend beyond mere combat. These decisions suggest a director attuned to the emotional cadence of his story, not just its visual spectacle. The director's aesthetic choices also pay homage to prior cinematic influences while establishing his own voice. The fights often employ slow motion interspersed with rapid-fire cuts, a rhythm reminiscent of classic martial arts cinema, yet the visceral weight of the blows leans into contemporary realism. Color grading further delineates realms and emotional states. The harsh, bluish tints of Outworld contrast with the grittier, sun-bleached tones of Earthrealm, guiding audience perception subconsciously. McQuoid's eye for detail extends to sound integration, where the clash of weapons, bone-crunching impacts, and ambient city noise combine to make every environment feel tangible. An underappreciated part of McQuoid's creative genesis is his insistence on subtle fan service that enriches narrative cohesion rather than distracts. Small visual nods, a dragon emblem, a fleeting cameo by classic characters, or a background billboard referencing arcade lore serve dual purposes. They reward longtime fans and establish continuity without pausing the film's momentum. These choices reveal a director balancing reverence for source material with the necessity of crafting a compelling story for new viewers, a tightrope few franchise reboots manage to walk so effectively. The film's initial marketing materials hint at McQuoid's larger vision, a mature, unflinching reboot that embraces the violent spectacle while emphasizing character stakes. Even in early trailers, the clarity of combat choreography and the deliberate use of cinematic space foreshadow the detailed attention paid throughout production. This is a director who sees the camera not just as a recorder of action, but as a narrative participant, orchestrating perspective to amplify tension and emotion. And yet, McQuoid maintains humility in storytelling. Spectacle never overshadows character, and visceral thrills serve story, not the other way around. Ultimately, the film's genesis reflects a balance of risk and reverence. A newcomer director tackling a globally recognized franchise could have leaned solely on nostalgia or spectacle. Instead, McQuoid's approach merges disciplined visual storytelling, choreographic precision, and thematic mindfulness. Every frame communicates intention, whether in subtle environmental cues or the brutal impact of a fatality. What emerges is a reboot that feels alive, conscious of both its lineage and the modern cinematic landscape, a foundation that allows the screenplay, performances, and production craft to flourish in subsequent layers. The director's journey into Mortal Kombat is as much about translating fan expectation into cinematic language as it is about asserting a personal voice. His choices, visual, thematic, and collaborative, create a universe that is coherent, intense, and emotionally legible, setting the stage for everything that follows. This foundation, rich in intention and execution, primes the audience for the story, the characters, and the choreography that will define the film's unique identity. And while McQuoid's fingerprints are present in every punch and shadow, he never overshadows the narrative. Instead, he frames it, giving viewers a map to navigate a multiverse of danger, honor, and legacy. The story's heartbeat came from the writers who transformed a decade-spanning franchise into a coherent cinematic narrative. Greg Russo, responsible for the screenplay, faced the dual challenge of honoring the original 1992 arcade roots while building a storyline palatable to new audiences. Russo, whose background includes both comic book adaptations and action thrillers, approached the script like a puzzle, how to preserve iconic fatalities and tournament lore while threading a compelling human story through Cole Young, the film's reluctant hero. From early drafts, it was clear that the story couldn't merely string together fight sequences. It needed a through line that made viewers care about why these warriors battled at all. The development timeline was meticulous. Russo spent months mapping character arcs and integrating video game canon into narrative beats. Key decisions included the insertion of a new protagonist, Cole, who acts as the audience's lens into a world already rich with established fighters like Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Liu Kang. This move was strategic. It allowed both fans and newcomers to navigate the multiverse without getting lost in excessive exposition. The script also experimented with non-linear storytelling in its early drafts, teasing the backstory of the Elder Gods and the Lin Kuei clan in fragmented flashbacks. While the final cut favored a more linear approach, these explorations informed the pacing and reveal of character histories, ensuring depth without overwhelming the viewer. Dialogue in Mortal Kombat is sparse, almost brutal in its economy, reflecting both the physicality of the characters and the high-stakes nature of their world. Russo deliberately stripped away filler, favoring moments where a glance or emotion conveys more than pages of text could. The result is a screenplay where tension arises as much from what's unsaid as from the combat itself. Consider the exchanges between Cole and Jax. Every line is weighted with subtext, revealing familial responsibility, fear, and resolve. This restraint demonstrates an understanding that in a franchise defined by visceral action, words must punctuate rather than dominate. Adaptation choices were another arena of thoughtful negotiation. Iconic characters required faithful visual and behavioral representation, but they also had to be grounded in realism for a modern audience. Sub-Zero's icy powers, for instance, needed to feel dangerous and tangible, not cartoonish. Similarly, Scorpion's revenge arc is anchored in his personal loss, giving emotional resonance to each fatality. Russo's script balanced spectacle with psychology, ensuring that each fight carried narrative weight, a departure from previous adaptations that often prioritized shock over story. Another key narrative decision involved the tournament itself. Rather than focusing solely on a single climactic event, the screenplay spreads battles across different realms and environments, each designed to test characters uniquely. The narrative strategy echoes Russo's philosophy. Combat sequences are not ornamental, they are catalysts for character evolution. Each skirmish pushes Cole and other fighters closer to understanding their identities and destinies, embedding growth within action. For audiences, this approach transforms what could be repetitive fighting into a journey with stakes that extend beyond the arena. Russo also faced the challenge of balancing fan service with narrative integrity. The screenplay nods to the franchise's arcade origins, fatalities, signature moves, and lore references, but never lets them derail story momentum. Small details like the inclusion of dragon tattoos or background glimpses of classic arenas reward longtime fans while keeping the plot clear for newcomers. These choices reflect a conscientious understanding of both narrative economy and franchise legacy. The script celebrates its roots without letting nostalgia dictate structure. The screenplay's tone deserves attention. Mortal Kombat walks a tightrope between grounded action and supernatural spectacle. Russo and McQuoid collaborated closely to ensure the script allowed for moments of levity without undermining intensity, and for emotional stakes without slowing pacing. This tonal calibration is evident in sequences where humor punctuates tension, a sly remark from Kung Lao or a sarcastic quip from Jax, offsetting the relentless violence just enough to make the darker moments land with greater impact. The balance is subtle, an artful blend that keeps audiences invested in both character and conflict. Early drafts also wrestled with representation of the multiverse. The final script incorporates a concise mythology that positions Earthrealm and Outworld as opposing forces with personal stakes rather than abstract concepts. Elder gods and clan politics are hinted at, never fully spelled out, maintaining mystique while guiding viewer understanding. This restraint shows Russo's appreciation for economy. The narrative respects the audience's intelligence, letting visual cues and character reactions do heavy lifting in world building. Every revelation feels earned, from Cole discovering his lineage to the shocking arrival of characters thought lost or sidelined in previous lore. Ultimately, the screenplay serves as both blueprint and heartbeat. Russo's careful structuring ensures that each fight, each emotional beat, and each reveal advances story and character simultaneously. The interplay between script and McQuoid's visual sensibility results in a film where dialogue, movement, and staging are inseparable. The audience experiences the story not as a series of disjointed scenes, but as an immersive journey through a universe, alive with consequence, emotion, and relentless motion. This careful orchestration lays the foundation for performances, production design, and choreography to elevate the narrative into cinematic form. By the time cameras rolled, the story was both familiar and fresh, a respectful homage to decades of Mortal Kombat history, and a calculated reimagining designed for a new generation. Russo's writing transforms what could have been a shallow action vehicle into a narrative with emotional resonance and strategic pacing. The screenplay's genius lies in its economy and precision, allowing McQuoid's directorial vision to breathe while ensuring that each punch, each glance, each whispered threat serves the dual purpose of thrilling and revealing. The structure he built doesn't just tell a story. It gives audiences a reason to care about every death, every victory, every betrayal. And that careful architecture of narrative is precisely why the film lands as a reboot that feels alive, urgent, and emotionally grounded. Casting Mortal Kombat required balancing fan expectations with fresh interpretations, and the decisions made in that room shaped the film's energy long before the first fight began. Simon McQuoid and his casting director faced the impossible: populate a universe known for larger-than-life warriors with actors who could embody both physicality and emotional weight. Cole Young, the new protagonist, demanded someone who could carry the audience through every beat of discovery, doubt, and ultimately, heroism. Lewis Tan's selection was deliberate. He's not just a martial artist, he brings a grounded intensity, a way of holding tension in his body that the camera can read instantly. His presence reassures viewers that every punch, every tumble, carries narrative consequence. The veteran cast provided both gravitas and spectacle. Joe Taslim as Sub-Zero embodies the icy precision fans expect, while Hiroyuki Sanada brings centuries of experience to Scorpion, translating decades of martial arts lore into cinematic motion. These choices reflect a deliberate strategy. Anchor the film with performers who can move seamlessly between choreography and subtle emotional beats. The casting sessions reportedly involved rigorous tests, not just for fighting skill, but for how actors interpreted their characters' emotional lives. Moments of hesitation, glances, and even posture were scrutinized. This is where the film's kinetic storytelling begins, long before any special effects are applied. Against-type casting emerges in moments that surprise. Jessica McNamee as Sonya Blade demonstrates that toughness need not erase vulnerability. Early scripts depicted her as almost archetypal soldier. McNamee's reading added layers, showing determination tempered by empathy. The ensemble's chemistry, from her sparring with Cole to her confrontations with Kano, is palpable, giving each interaction a tactile tension. The result is a group that feels lived in, each dynamic shaped not just by the script, but by how these actors inhabit the world. Audition stories reveal the high stakes of casting. Reports suggest multiple actors for key roles almost shifted the film's tonal balance. Had another performer played Cole, the emotional through line might have skewed more stoic or more impulsive, changing the resonance of key sequences. Likewise, the final selection of Chin Han as Shang Tsung leverages his ability to project menace subtly, making his presence a quiet pressure rather than constant theatrics. This restraint allows tension to simmer across scenes, demonstrating that casting decisions influence narrative pacing as much as dialogue or editing. McQuoid also prioritized ensemble cohesion. Rehearsals went beyond individual skill. They were exercises in spatial awareness, reaction timing, and collective rhythm. Each fight scene becomes an ecosystem of movement where one actor's motion informs another's. This approach transforms what could have been isolated showpiece moments into sequences with rhythm, flow, and emergent narrative tension. Observing these scenes, it's clear that casting wasn't just about who could throw a kick, it was about how bodies communicate story. Another layer lies in the casting of secondary characters. Mehcad Brooks as Jax offers a stabilizing force, a mix of mentorship and comic timing, while Ludi Lin as Liu Kang brings a meditative energy that contrasts with the chaos of other fighters. Even smaller roles carry weight. Subtle physicality or vocal choices reinforce world building. The careful calibration ensures that every performer contributes to a network of tension, momentum, and emotional resonance, proving that casting choices ripple across the entire cinematic experience. Actor preparation underscores the physical and emotional rigor demanded. Lewis Tan reportedly trained extensively, not only mastering martial arts choreography but understanding Cole's psychological arc, how fear, curiosity, and pride influence movement. Joe Taslim and Hiroyuki Sanada also undertook intensive fight rehearsals, balancing safety with authenticity, ensuring that on-screen blows landed with believability. These investments manifest in a rhythm that feels instinctive. Viewers sense that since actors inhabit their roles physically as well as emotionally, casting decisions also influenced visual storytelling. Choices about who moved where, who dominated space, and how the camera framed these presences were informed by actor strengths. For instance, Sub-Zero's icy efficiency is mirrored in tight, controlled framing, whereas Cole's developing confidence is tracked with wider, dynamic shots that allow exploration of space. The actor's abilities dictate not just performance but cinematography, demonstrating the intertwined nature of casting and visual design. Ultimately, the cast's selection shapes both spectacle and narrative. McQuoid's insistence on performers who could convey depth through action and presence pays off. Every fight is also a character beat, every glance a narrative signal. The interplay between seasoned veterans and newcomers creates a living ecosystem, where history, skill, and energy converge. By choosing actors who could embody physical authenticity, emotional resonance, and mythic weight, Mortal Kombat achieves a coherence that extends beyond choreography, turning each scene into a story in motion. It's a reminder that in a reboot like this, casting isn't just about star power, it's about inhabiting a universe with credibility and gravitas. Lewis Tan's performance as Cole Young has a strange burden placed on it. He has to be both the audience's entry point and the emotional spine of a universe that already had icons waiting in the wings. That is not an easy position. Fans came for Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Sonya, Kano, and fatalities with bone-cracking attitude. Cole, meanwhile, arrives as the new guy. The danger is obvious. Make him too bland, and he becomes dead weight. Make him too heroic too soon, and he feels artificial. Tan's smartest choice is restraint. Cole begins the film like a man who has already lost too many rounds, not just in the cage, but in life. Watch how Tan carries himself early on. His shoulders are tight, his face guarded, his fighting style practical rather than flashy. He does not move like someone destined for myth. He moves like someone trying to survive another bad night. That physical language matters because Cole's arc is built around identity before power. When he learns about the dragon marking, Earthrealm, Outworld, and the larger war surrounding him, Tan does not play awe in a huge theatrical way. He plays confusion, suspicion, and quiet fear. Good choice. In a movie this myth-heavy, disbelief is what keeps the human element alive. Cole's weakness as a character is also where Tan has to work hardest. On the page, Cole is functional more than fascinating. An original protagonist designed to guide newcomers through the lore. That kind of role can feel like a tour guide with fists. Tan pushes against that by emphasizing family. His scenes with his wife and daughter give Cole emotional grounding. Even when the script moves quickly past domestic intimacy, he softens around them. His voice drops. His aggression drains away. Suddenly, the fighter is not defined by winning, but by protecting the only space where he feels fully seen. That gives his later transformation more weight than the writing alone provides. Then there is the physical performance. Tan's martial arts background gives the film something essential: credibility. He does not fake the rhythm of combat. He understands distance, balance, timing, and how exhaustion changes movement. In his early fights, Cole absorbs impact heavily. He blocks late. He reacts more than he controls. By the time his abilities manifest, the shift is visible not just through costume or effects, but through posture. He starts occupying space differently. Wider stance, cleaner reactions, more direct eye contact. The movie may explain his power through lore, but Tan sells it through the body. Joe Taslim's Sub-Zero is the opposite kind of performance. Minimal dialogue, maximum presence. He does not need speeches because everything about him feels designed to remove warmth from the frame. Taslim plays by hand like a predator with discipline. No wasted motion, no unnecessary expression. Even when the visual effects are doing the obvious work with ice, Taslim is doing something subtler underneath. He makes stillness threatening. A lesser actor would overplay the villainy, leaning into snarls and theatrical menace. Taslim keeps him controlled, and that control is exactly what makes him frightening. His best moments are not always the kills. They are the pauses before violence. The way he looks at an opponent like he has already calculated the ending. The way his body remains calm while everyone else panics. Sub-Zero's brutality works because Taslim gives it ritualistic precision. When he freezes blood into a weapon, the effect is grotesque, yes, but his reaction is almost casual. That casualness is the horror. He is not enjoying violence like Kano. He is not raging like Scorpion. He is executing purpose. Cold as technique, cold as philosophy. Hiroyuki Sanada, meanwhile, brings the film its soul in surprisingly limited screen time. His Hanzo Hasashi is built from grief, honor, and volcanic restraint. Sanada has spent decades mastering the art of saying everything with the smallest shift of the eyes, and Mortal Kombat benefits enormously from that discipline. In the opening sequence, before the revenge mythology fully ignites, he plays Hanzo as a family man first. That matters. The tragedy lands because we see tenderness before we see rage. He is not introduced as Scorpion. He is introduced as someone who has something to lose. And when he loses it, Sanada does not simply explode. He fractures. His fight choreography in the opening feels desperate, personal, almost ugly in its emotional force. Every strike carries grief before vengeance hardens it into legend. Later, when Scorpion finally returns, the performance changes. The body is heavier. The voice feels carved out of ash. That famous line, "Get over here," could have been cheap fan service. Sonata makes it feel like a curse dragged through generations. Pure iconography, but with pain under the armor. Jessica McNamee's Sonya blade gives the film a necessary grounded counterweight. She plays Sonya not as a superhero waiting for permission, but as a soldier furious at being excluded from destiny. That frustration gives the character bite. She has studied the markings, tracked the mythology, risked her life, and still gets treated like she does not belong because she lacks the symbol. McNamee makes that insecurity sharp rather than sentimental. Her Sonya is not asking to be chosen. She is angry that the universe has failed to recognize what she has already earned. Her chemistry with Kano becomes one of the film's most watchable dynamics because she refuses to soften around him. Their scenes crackle with irritation. McNamee gives Sonya a controlled intensity, while Josh Lawson's Kano is all mess, ego, and mouth. That contrast works beautifully. Lawson knows exactly what movie he is in. Kano is vulgar, selfish, obnoxious, and somehow the comic engine the film desperately needs. He throws off the rhythm of every scene in the best way, puncturing solemn mythology with trash talk energy. Without him, the film risks becoming too stiff. With him, it breathes. Lawson's performance succeeds because it has timing. Comedy in action films is dangerous. Too much, and stakes collapse. Too little, and the world feels airless. Kano's humor lands because Lawson keeps it rooted in character. He is not making jokes for the audience. He is using humor as dominance, distraction, and self-defense. Even his cowardice feels active. He is always angling, always testing the room, always looking for leverage. That makes his eventual turn feel less like a plot requirement and more like the natural outcome of a man who was never truly on anyone's side but his own. Ludi Lin's Liu Kang and Max Huang's Kung Lao bring a different energy. Discipline, elegance, tradition. Lin plays Liu Kang with calm conviction, the kind that can easily become flat if pushed too far. He avoids that by giving Liu a quiet warmth, especially in scenes where he guides Cole and the others through training. Huang's Kung Lao, on the other hand, has a sharper edge. There is pride in him, almost royal confidence, and his physical grace makes his fatality moment one of the film's most memorable bursts of fan satisfaction. Clean, brutal, operatic. Mehcad Brooks as Jax has one of the clearer emotional journeys. His performance begins with military confidence, then gets stripped down through trauma, injury, and reconstruction. The cybernetic arms could have reduced him to visual gimmickry, but Brooks plays the loss underneath the machinery. His early vulnerability gives the later power-up a genuine emotional payoff. You feel the humiliation before the comeback. That is why it works. Taken together, the lead performances give Mortal Kombat more texture than its plot sometimes provides. The script may move fast, and some characters absolutely deserved more room to breathe, but the actors understand the assignment. Make myth physical, make violence personal, and never let the game references become empty decoration. Tan grounds the entry point. Taslim freezes the air around him. Sonata brings tragic grandeur. McNamee, Lawson, Lin, Huang, and Brooks fill the world with friction and flavor. The result is not subtle chamber drama. It was never meant to be. But inside all the blood, blades, fire, and ice, the performers carve out enough humanity to make the combat matter. And yet, even the strongest lead performance needs a surrounding constellation to fully shine, because Mortal Kombat is not built as a solo vehicle. It is an ensemble machine, and the next layer is where the supporting players, side dynamics, rivalries, and scene-stealing moments turn the film from a simple origin story into a living arena. Mortal Kombat works best when it remembers that its universe is not just a hero's journey, it is a collision chamber. Every character enters with a different rhythm, different ego, different wound, and the film's supporting cast is where that chaos becomes fun. The leads carry the myth, but the ensemble gives the movie its pulse. Without the side players, the film becomes a straight-faced lore delivery system. With them, it becomes something rougher, stranger, louder. A tournament movie without an actual tournament still needs the feeling of fighters being thrown together, and this cast understands that friction is the whole point. Josh Lawson's Kano is the obvious scene stealer, and honestly, the movie knows it. He enters like someone kicked the door open on a completely different genre. Everyone else is carrying destiny, trauma, prophecy, ancient bloodlines. Kano is carrying insults. That contrast could have been disastrous. But Lawson plays him with such shameless commitment that he becomes the film's pressure valve. Every time the mythology gets too heavy, Kano punctures it. He does not respect Raiden. He does not respect Liu Kang. He barely respects the concept of personal hygiene. And somehow that makes him valuable. What makes Kano work is that the comedy is aggressive, not random. He is not just making jokes. He is attacking people with language because that is how he survives rooms where he is physically or morally outmatched. His mouth is a weapon before his laser eye ever arrives. Watch him during the training sequences. He mocks because he is insecure, provokes because he wants control, and insults because silence would force him to feel the danger of the situation. That gives the performance a grubby little intelligence. He is funny because he is awful, but he is not empty. Sonya and Kano's dynamic becomes one of the film's strongest supporting relationships because it has immediate texture. She cannot stand him, and he enjoys that too much. Jessica McNamee plays Sonya with clenched discipline, while Lawson plays Kano like a human oil spill. The scenes between them have actual comedic architecture. Her restraint tightens, his vulgarity expands, and the tension snaps in exactly the right places. The film uses them almost like a buddy cop pairing from hell, except one of them is trying to save Earthrealm, and the other would sell it for enough cash and a beer. Mechad Brooks gives Jax a steadier emotional presence. In a film crowded with magical powers, ancient clans, and supernatural villains, Jax feels rooted in military reality. His friendship with Sonya matters because it gives both characters a history outside the prophecy machine. Brooks plays him with warmth beneath the muscle, which makes his injury hit harder than a simple action beat. When Sub-Zero destroys his arms, the moment is not just body horror. It is identity horror. Jax is a soldier whose strength, confidence, and usefulness are violently taken from him. His recovery scenes could have easily become mechanical. Man loses arms, man gets metal arms, man punches harder. But Brooks gives the arc a wounded humility. There is embarrassment in him. Rage too, but embarrassment first. He does not immediately become the comic book version of himself. He has to crawl back into belief. That small emotional step matters. When the upgraded arms finally manifest with full power, the payoff works because the film has shown him at his lowest. The spectacle has a psychological root. That is always better than effects for effects' sake. Ludi Lin's Liu Kang and Max Huang's Kung Lao bring the movie into more classical martial arts territory. Their presence gives the film discipline after the noisy chaos of Kano and the grounded soldier energy of Sonya and Jax. Liu Kang is the patient believer, the man who has already accepted the spiritual architecture of this universe. Lin plays him softly, sometimes almost too softly, but there is value in that restraint. He is not trying to dominate scenes. He is trying to create calm inside a movie built from violence. Kung Lao, though, is the sharper blade. Max Huang gives him elegance with an edge of arrogance, and that little edge makes the character pop. He knows he is good. He stands like someone who has never seriously doubted his own place in the hierarchy. That confidence turns his fight moments into performance art. The hat is already one of the franchise's most outrageous weapons, and the movie wisely refuses to apologize for it. When Kung Lao gets his big fatality, the scene leans all the way into absurdity and gore. It is disgusting. It is theatrical. It is pure Mortal Kombat. Chin Han's Shang Tsung occupies a more difficult position because the script does not give him as much room as the character deserves. Shang Tsung should feel seductive, ancient, politically dangerous, a villain who wins before the fight begins because he understands corruption better than combat. Chin Han brings the right voice and presence, that smooth menace that suggests centuries of cruelty wrapped in ceremony. But the movie often uses him as a looming threat rather than a fully explored manipulator. You feel the potential every time he appears. You also feel the missed opportunity. Still, his scenes with the Outworld fighters create a useful sense of dark hierarchy. Mileena, Reiko, Natara, Cabal, and Goro are not developed deeply, but they function as extensions of Outworld's brutality. They are less characters than weapons pointed at Earthrealm. That can be frustrating from a storytelling angle, especially for fans who know how much lore these figures carry. Mileena, in particular, deserves more psychological texture than the film gives her. But visually and tonally, the group creates pressure. They make Outworld feel like a place where cruelty has become government policy. Cabal is the standout among them because he has personality baked into the performance. His speed, burned appearance, respirator voice, and sneering attitude give him immediate identity. He feels like someone who has history with Kano even before the film explains enough of it, and that history adds flavor to their scenes. Cabal's presence also helps turn Kano's betrayal into something more than sudden plot movement. He represents temptation speaking in a familiar accent. Not destiny, not ideology, just greed, resentment, and the comfortable pull of being exactly as selfish as you always wanted to be. Raiden, played by Tadanobu Asano, brings godly distance rather than warmth. This version of Raiden is severe, impatient, almost tired of humanity's failure to rise to the occasion. That choice makes sense conceptually. A thunder god who has watched realms fall would not necessarily be charming. But the performance sits in a tricky space because the film needs him to deliver exposition, judgment, and authority without much emotional access. Asano gives him presence, but the writing keeps him remote. He feels powerful, yes, but not always dramatically alive. The ensemble's biggest strength is contrast. Cole is uncertain, Sonya is driven, Kano is chaos, Jax is wounded pride, Liu Kang is faith, Kung Lao is elegance, Raiden is judgment, Shang Tsung is corruption. Sub-Zero is death wearing armor. These energies bounce off each other in ways that make the film more watchable than its structure sometimes deserves. When the story slows, the cast chemistry keeps sparks flying. When the mythology gets dense, someone's attitude cuts through it. That is why the supporting cast matters so much. Mortal Kombat is not a film built on subtle character studies, but it still needs human texture between the fatalities. The ensemble gives it that. Not every character gets enough screen time. Some are clearly waiting for a sequel that may or may not fully pay them off. But the performers bring enough flavor, physicality, and friction to make Earthrealm and Outworld feel populated by personalities, not just costumes. And once those personalities are in place, the next question becomes visual. What kind of world can hold them? Because a movie like Mortal Kombat lives or dies not only by who fights, but by where they fight, what they wear, what weapons they carry, and whether the universe around them feels ancient, dangerous, and real enough to bleed. The physical world of Mortal Kombat has to perform a difficult trick. It must look grounded enough to feel dangerous, but exaggerated enough to belong to a franchise where sorcerers steal souls, monks throw fire, and a man with a metal hat can slice enemies like meat on a deli counter. That balance lives in the production design. Too realistic, and the fantasy dies. Too artificial, and the stakes evaporate. The 2021 film chooses a gritty texture, building its world out of stone, rust, dust, blood, and old symbols. Everything feels worn down, as if this war has been going on long before Cole Young ever hears the word Outworld. The opening in 17th century Japan is the film's strongest design statement. Hanzo Hasashi's home is peaceful but not polished. Wood, earth, fabric, water, tools, simple materials arranged with domestic calm. The environment tells us who Hanzo is before the violence begins. He is not introduced in a palace or battlefield. He is introduced in a family space, surrounded by evidence of ordinary life. That choice matters, because once Bai-Han arrives, the destruction feels intimate. The set does not exist merely to look period appropriate. It exists to be violated. The beauty is fragile, and the design makes that fragility visible. Sub-Zero's visual language is built around invasion. When frost creeps across surfaces, the world itself changes allegiance. Warm textures become hostile. Domestic space becomes a death chamber. That is smart production design working hand in hand with visual effects. Ice is not just decoration, it is character presence. Sub-Zero does not simply enter locations, he transforms them. The film understands that a villain becomes more frightening when his power alters the environment around him. Cold becomes architecture, Fear becomes temperature. Earthrealm, by contrast, is deliberately unglamorous. Cole's world is gyms, parking lots, cramped interiors, fluorescent light, and cheap practicality. This is not superhero destiny wrapped in gold. It is working-class exhaustion. The cage-fighting spaces feel sweaty and temporary, like places where people go to spend violence because they cannot afford anything better. That grounded ugliness helps Cole's arc. He begins in a world with no mythic shape, which makes the later reveal of temples, realms, and ancient markings feel like a rupture in reality rather than business as usual. Sonya's hideout has one of the film's more interesting design ideas: obsession as interior decoration. Her walls are covered with research, photos, maps, articles, and evidence of a hidden war she has been trying to prove. It looks less like a military base and more like the inside of a mind that cannot let go. That is good environmental storytelling. You understand Sonya immediately. She has built a life around a mystery no one else takes seriously enough. The clutter is not random. It is character psychology pinned to walls. Raiden's temple moves the film into sacred fantasy territory. Stone corridors, ancient markings, ceremonial spaces, and dramatic shafts of light give the location a mythic heaviness. The design is not especially warm, and that is the point. This is not a welcoming training camp. It feels like a place built by forces older than human comfort. A place where champions are measured and discarded. The wide spaces make the fighters look small, which helps communicate the scale of the conflict. Earthrealm's defenders are not entering a clubhouse. They are stepping into history. The training grounds are especially important because they have to serve multiple purposes. They are exposition spaces, combat spaces, comedy spaces, and character development spaces. Visually, the film keeps them simple. Open areas, hard surfaces, minimal distraction. That lets the bodies dominate the frame. In a different movie, the designers might have overloaded these sets with mystical objects and glowing artifacts. Here, restraint works better. The fighters are the spectacle. The environment frames them without swallowing them. Outworld, meanwhile, is where the design becomes harsher and more diseased. The realm is not presented as seductive fantasy. It feels corrupted, jagged, and spiritually polluted. The color palette leans into sickly darkness, ash, and decay. This is a world where power has curdled. Shang Tsung's spaces suggest hierarchy without comfort, ceremony without beauty. The production design gives Outworld a political feeling. This is not chaos exactly. It is organized cruelty. Every shadow feels governed by fear. Costume design carries much of the character work. Scorpion's armor needs to satisfy decades of iconography while still fitting Sonata's tragic physical presence. The film wisely avoids making him look like cosplay. The textures feel battle-worn, layered, and functional, with the yellow accents serving as identity rather than bright cartoon branding. Sub-Zero's costume is even more controlled. Dark armor, masked face, cold blue highlights, everything designed to make him feel less like a man than a moving weapon. His costume does what good villain design should do. It reduces humanity without removing presence. Sonya's wardrobe stays practical, reinforcing her outsider status. She is not dressed like a chosen champion because, for much of the film, she technically is not one. Her clothing tells us she is operating from resourcefulness rather than divine selection. Jax's design journey is more dramatic, moving from soldier realism to cybernetic exaggeration. The first version of his mechanical arms looks almost painfully insufficient, which is a clever visual choice. They are not triumphant yet. They are survival equipment. Only later do they become heroic iconography. Kano's look is grimy perfection. The costume does not try to make him cool in a clean, poster-ready way. He looks like he smells bad. That is a compliment. The open shirts, rough textures, and careless styling all reinforce his personality. Vulgar, opportunistic, allergic to dignity. When his eye ability manifests, it does not feel like a noble awakening. It feels like the universe accidentally handed a superpower to the worst possible man. Costume and character snap together. The weapons also matter because Mortal Kombat is a franchise of silhouettes. Scorpion's kunai, Kung Lao's hat, Liu Kang's fire, Sub-Zero's ice blades, Jax's arms, each visual element must be readable instantly. The film understands that weapon design is branding, but it tries to give the objects weight. Scorpion's kunai is not just a reference. It is born from a garden tool in the opening sequence, connecting domestic life, survival, and vengeance in one object. That transformation gives the weapon emotional history. It is not merchandise. It is grief with a chain attached. Where the design occasionally struggles is scale. Some environments feel smaller than the mythology around them. For a franchise built on realms, tournaments, gods, monsters, and ancient rivalries, the film sometimes feels constrained by its locations. You can sense the budget being stretched between character effects, fights, and world building. But the best design choices compensate through texture rather than size. A cracked wall, a frozen surface, a blood-stained weapon, a shrine-like chamber, these details suggest a larger universe beyond what the camera can fully show. That is the key achievement of the production design: suggestion. Mortal Kombat does not always give us the vastness the lore promises, but it gives us enough material reality to believe the world has history. Earthrealm feels bruised. Outworld feels poisoned. Raiden's temple feels ancient. Hanzo's home feels mourned. The costumes and weapons carry identity even when the script moves too quickly to explain every legacy behind them. And once that physical world is built, the camera has to decide how to reveal it. A blade can be beautifully designed, but it only becomes cinema when light catches it at the right angle. A temple can feel ancient, but only if the frame gives it weight. That is where cinematography takes over, turning sets, costumes, bodies, fire, ice, and blood into visual storytelling. Mortal Kombat's cinematography has one central job: make impossible bodies feel readable. That sounds simple until you remember what this movie is juggling: ice magic, fire fists, teleporting ninjas, cybernetic arms, flying blades, monster fights, and fatalities designed to make the audience wince and cheer at the same time. The camera cannot be too elegant because the violence needs impact. It cannot be too chaotic because martial arts action dies when you cannot understand movement. The film's visual execution lives in that tension, trying to preserve the clarity of old-school fight cinema while delivering the speed and brutality modern audiences expect. The opening sequence is where the movie looks most confident. The camera gives Hanzo Hasashi's world space before it destroys it. There is patience in those early frames: domestic quiet, natural textures, bodies moving through a peaceful environment. Then Baihan arrives, and the visual rhythm changes. The frame tightens, the cold creeps in, movement becomes sharper, more predatory. What works beautifully here is contrast. Hanzo's home is filmed with enough warmth to feel human, while Sub-Zero's presence drains the image of comfort. Before anyone explains the feud, the cinematography has already told us what kind of force has entered the story. Fight scenes succeed when the camera respects geography. Too many modern action films chop combat into visual confetti: fists, elbows, reactions, cuts so fast the editor might as well be hiding the choreography. Mortal Kombat usually avoids that trap. Not always, but often enough. The camera lets performers complete movements. Kicks land in visible space. Bodies cross the frame with purpose. When Scorpion swings the kunai, you understand where it comes from, where it travels, and why the impact matters. That kind of clarity is not decorative. It is the difference between watching action and feeling action. Sub-Zero's sequences benefit from a colder, more controlled visual grammar. The camera often frames him as a shape before a person. Mask, armor, silhouette, breath, ice. He dominates negative space. Characters look smaller when he enters, not because the lens literally shrinks them, but because the composition gives him command over the environment. Watch his attack on Jax. The setting is simple, almost bare, but the camera turns that emptiness into vulnerability. There is nowhere to hide, no visual clutter, just a soldier, a killer, and the horrible certainty that strength alone will not be enough. Cole Young's visual arc is less iconic but still purposeful. Early on, he is often framed in ordinary spaces: cages, locker rooms, streets, cramped interiors. The camera keeps him grounded, sometimes boxed in, reinforcing that he does not yet belong to the mythic world. As the film progresses, his framing becomes more active. Wider compositions allow him to move with more confidence. The camera starts treating him less like a man being chased by destiny and more like someone beginning to occupy it. The change is not subtle enough to call elegant, but it works. You feel the movie slowly granting him visual legitimacy. The use of color is blunt but effective. Earthrealm carries dust, steel, yellowed light, and practical grime. Outworld leans diseased and shadow-heavy. Raiden's temple sits somewhere between sacred and severe, with stone textures and cold illumination giving the training scenes a ritual quality. Sub-Zero brings blue-white death. Scorpion brings hellfire orange. Liu Kang's flames push warmth into frames that often need it. Is this color symbolism delicate? No, but Mortal Kombat is not a delicate property. These are elemental characters, and the cinematography understands that color should function almost like a fighting stance. Lighting becomes especially important in selling powers that could easily look weightless. Ice can turn fake fast if it does not interact convincingly with skin, metal, breath, and shadow. The film often helps itself by lighting Sub-Zero's effects as environmental events rather than floating digital decorations. Frost catches surfaces, reflections shift, faces take on colder tones, fire scenes do the opposite, letting orange light pulse against bodies and walls, making Liu Kang and Scorpion's powers feel like heat sources inside the world. The best visual effects are not merely animated. They appear to change the photography around them. The camera movement varies depending on character energy. Kano's scenes feel looser, more reactive, less ceremonial. He brings mess, so the visuals around him loosen up. Liu Kang and Kung Lao get cleaner compositions, giving their martial discipline more elegance. Scorpion and Sub-Zero receive the most mythic framing, especially when the film leans into silhouettes, smoke, flame, and ice. That is smart prioritizing. The movie understands which characters are legends and which characters are engines of chaos. The camera treats them accordingly. Where the cinematography sometimes struggles is with scale. Mortal Kombat wants to be enormous. Realms, ancient wars, divine stakes, but many scenes feel visually contained. The frame rarely gives us the overwhelming vastness the lore implies. Part of that comes from the story structure, part from budget limitations, and part from the choice to keep the reboot grounded. Still, there are moments when you want the camera to breathe more, to show realms with grandeur instead of glimpses. The mythology is wide. The film often feels narrow. Texture helps, but it cannot fully replace awe. The Goro fight exposes both the film's strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, the scene gives Cole a personal arena, tying action directly to family and survival. That is good visual storytelling. The stakes are close, physical, immediate. On the other hand, Goro himself never quite carries the majestic terror he should. The camera has to sell a massive four-armed monster, but the staging feels more functional than legendary. You understand the fight. You follow the action. But you do not feel the full nightmare weight of facing a creature that should make the entire frame tremble. By contrast, the final Scorpion and Sub-Zero confrontation gives the cinematography the iconography it has been waiting for. Fire against ice, orange against blue, rage against control. The frame becomes elemental, almost comic book operatic, but in the best way. This is where the movie's visual language finally snaps into full franchise mode. The camera does not need to explain anything. It just places two mythic forces in opposition and lets color, movement, and impact carry the emotion. Sometimes cinema really is that primal. Heat, cold, blood, revenge. Editing plays a major role in whether the visuals land. The film's best fights use cuts to emphasize impact, not hide confusion. A punch lands, a body reacts, the frame gives you enough time to register pain before moving on. The weaker moments cut away too quickly, especially when creature effects or larger group action enter the equation. Still, the overall approach favors legibility more than many contemporary blockbusters. For a fighting game adaptation, that matters enormously. A fatality only satisfies if the audience understands the setup, the movement, and the horrible punchline. The technical execution is not flawless, but it has a strong sense of priority. Clarity over chaos. Elemental contrast over subtle symbolism. Physical impact over glossy polish. The cinematography knows Mortal Kombat is not about graceful realism. It is about making mythic violence feel heavy enough to bruise. When it works, the camera becomes another combatant, ducking, circling, recoiling, and striking with the fighters. When it falls short, it is usually because the world feels smaller than the legend. But the visual foundation remains strong. Readable action, bold color, tactile lighting, and enough iconic imagery to remind us why these characters survived decades of fan obsession. And once the eyes have absorbed all that fire, ice, steel, and blood, the ears have to finish the job. Mortal Kombat is not just a visual assault, it is a sonic one. Every cracked bone, roaring flame, frozen breath, blade scrape, and bass-heavy musical cue helps decide whether the violence feels weightless or unforgettable. Mortal Kombat sounds like a movie built out of impact. That matters more than people sometimes realize, because a fighting game adaptation cannot survive on images alone. A punch can look perfect and still feel fake if the sound does not sell the weight. A blade can flash across the frame, but the scrape, whistle, and wet aftermath are what make the audience flinch. This film understands that violence has rhythm, it has texture, it has punchlines. The soundscape is not subtle, and it should not be. Mortal Kombat is a universe where bodies are broken as spectacle, so the audio has to make every fracture feel like a terrible celebration. Benjamin Wallfish's score carries the impossible task of honoring one of the most recognizable musical identities in video game movie history without turning the film into nostalgic karaoke. Everyone knows the pulse of the classic Mortal Kombat theme. That electronic chant lives rent-free in pop culture. Wallfish does not simply drop it everywhere and beg for applause. He treats it like a weapon saved for the right moment, weaving hints of that familiar energy into a larger score built from heavy percussion, electronic textures, and ominous orchestral weight. The music says, yes, you know this world, but this version has sharper teeth. The score works best when it understands character as rhythm. Sub-Zero's presence is not scored with warmth or emotional complexity. His music feels cold, metallic, and controlled, matching the way Joe Taslim performs him. You do not hear chaos around him. You hear pressure. Scorpion's material, by contrast, carries heat and tragedy. The music around him needs to evoke vengeance without reducing him to fan service rage, and Wallfish gives those moments a heavier emotional undercurrent. Fire in this film does not just burn, it remembers. That is the difference between a cool entrance and a mythic return. Sound design does even more character work than the score. Sub-Zero's ice has a distinct personality, cracking, spreading, tightening. It does not sound like generic magic. It sounds like the environment being forced into submission. When frost crawls across surfaces, the audio makes it feel invasive, almost predatory. Tiny crystallizing details build into larger frozen impacts, and that layering gives his power physical credibility. You believe the cold because you hear it eating the space before it fully takes the frame. Scorpion's chain has a different kind of sonic identity. It cuts through the mix with metallic violence, a sharp whipping sound followed by the brutal certainty of impact. That chain is not just a weapon, it is punctuation. Every time it launches, the sound prepares the audience for pain. Then comes the pull, the drag, the body movement, the ugly mechanics of force. The famous "get over here" lands because the audio around it creates anticipation. The voice, the chain, the impact. 3 beats, 1 iconic payoff. The fatalities rely on exaggerated sound, and the exaggeration is exactly the point. Mortal Kombat has never been tasteful about bodily destruction. Bones crunch louder than reality. Blood lands heavier than physics. Flesh tears with a grotesque clarity that borders on cartoonish, but the film's tone needs that excess. A realistic fatality might be horrifying in the wrong way. Too grim, too miserable. These sounds are brutal, but they are also designed as genre applause lines. The audience is meant to recoil and grin in the same breath. Disgust and delight smash together. Kano's scenes introduce a looser audio rhythm. His dialogue often cuts across tension, and the mix lets his voice shove its way into scenes just like the character does. He interrupts the sonic seriousness of Raiden's temple and the mythic weight around the chosen fighters. That disruption is valuable. When Kano talks, the movie's soundscape becomes messier, more human, more obnoxious. You can almost feel the air being polluted by his personality. Then, when his laser eye finally erupts, the sound has a nasty, sudden burn to it. Less noble power, more dangerous malfunction. The training sequences use impact sound as emotional measurement. Early hits feel punishing and humiliating. Bodies slap against stone. Breath gets knocked out. Weapons land with unfriendly weight. As characters begin to understand their arcana, the audio shifts from failure to activation. Powers do not arrive quietly. Jax's arms, Liu Kang's fire, Sonya's energy blasts, each sound marks a body becoming something more than human. The sound design makes transformation feel mechanical, elemental, or explosive depending on the character. That variety keeps the supernatural elements from blending into one generic effects soup. Silence plays a smaller but important role. The opening sequence uses quiet effectively before the massacre begins. Domestic sounds, small movements, natural ambience, the fragile calm of a family space make the violence feel like an intrusion rather than a default state. That quiet is crucial. Without it, Sub-Zero's arrival would be just another action beat. With it, the first attack feels like a violation. The film could have used more of that restraint later. Sometimes it rushes from loud moment to loud moment, trusting volume where contrast might have hit harder. The mix generally favors clarity. Dialogue remains understandable, impacts are centered, and power effects are distinct enough that the audience can tell who is doing what even in busier scenes. That matters in ensemble action. When fire, ice, blades, punches, monsters, and shouting all compete for space, bad mixing turns spectacle into sludge. Mortal Kombat mostly avoids that. The sound team keeps the major elements separated, allowing the chaos to feel organized. Organized chaos is the franchise's natural language. The film's biggest sonic limitation is emotional memorability beyond the legacy theme. Wallfish's score supports the film well, but only a few motifs linger after the credits. The classic theme energy still dominates audience memory because it carries decades of cultural weight. That is not entirely a failure. Competing with nostalgia that powerful is almost impossible. But the reboot's own musical identity could have been bolder, especially for characters like Liu Kang, Sonya, and Shang Tsung. They sound effective in the moment, yet not always unforgettable afterward. Still, the audio landscape does what this movie needs. It gives violence weight, powers texture, characters sonic identities, and fan service moments enough force to land without feeling completely hollow. Mortal Kombat is a film of bodies colliding with destiny, and the sound design makes those collisions hurt. The music raises the myth. The effects sell the flesh. The silences, when they arrive, remind us what violence destroys before it entertains us. And once sound has given the fights their bite, the next layer is the story behind the camera. The training, the injuries avoided or endured, the choreography, the pandemic-era release complications, and the practical grind of turning a beloved, ridiculous, blood-soaked game universe into something actors could actually perform in front of a camera. The production journey of Mortal Kombat feels almost perfectly matched to the movie itself. Sweaty, physical, complicated, slightly chaotic, and held together by people who clearly understood that this franchise lives or dies through bodies in motion. This was not a film that could hide behind dialogue and digital spectacle alone. If the fights looked fake, the whole thing collapsed. Production took place in South Australia, with filming based around Adelaide studios and other local locations, running from September 16 to December 13, 2019. That matters because the movie was completed before the world fully changed, but released into a completely different theatrical reality. The shoot itself had a practical foundation. For all the ice, fire, soul-stealing, and digital blood, Mortal Kombat needed actors who could actually move. Lewis Tan came into the film with deep martial arts experience, and that instantly changed what the camera could ask of him. You can stage fights differently when your lead understands rhythm, distance, and impact. The production did not have to cut around him constantly or reduce his movement to fragments. That gives Cole Young's fights a grounded texture, even when the character's arcana pushes him into comic book territory. Joe Taslim brought another level of physical authority. Before becoming an actor, Taslim had serious martial arts and judo credentials, and that history bleeds into Sub-Zero. His movement is not flashy for the sake of flash. It is efficient, controlled, mean. When a performer like that is inside the costume, the stunt team can build choreography around restraint instead of noise. Sub-Zero does not need to spin 10 times to look dangerous. He just has to step forward like the ending has already been decided. That is production intelligence, knowing when less movement creates more fear. Hiroyuki Sanada's involvement gave the film a different kind of credibility. He brings decades of screen combat experience, but also the discipline to make action emotional. The opening sequence depends on that combination. It is not just cool samurai revenge imagery. It has weight because Sonata understands how to perform grief through motion. Every turn, every strike, every desperate burst of violence carries the feeling of a man whose world has been destroyed in real time. The production wisely places that sequence at the front of the film because it announces the standard. The fights should hurt before they entertain. Training for a movie like this is not glamorous in the way marketing makes it look. It is repetition. Again, again, again. A punch misses by inches until it looks like it lands. A fall is practiced until the body can survive it. A weapon swing has to be aggressive enough for camera, but controlled enough not to injure the person receiving it. That invisible labor is all over Mortal Kombat. The best fights have the rhythm of rehearsal without losing the illusion of danger. You feel choreography, but you also feel impact. The stunt team had to solve a franchise-specific problem. How do you translate moves designed for gameplay into cinematic combat? A video game fatality works because the player accepts exaggeration. In live action, that same exaggeration can turn ridiculous fast. The production's answer was to build from physical action first, then let visual effects push it into Mortal Kombat territory. Scorpion's kunai, Kung Lao's hat, Jax's arms, Liu Kang's fire, Sub-Zero's ice. Each begins with a body-based action that the effects department can expand. That keeps the supernatural from floating away. The fatalities were their own production language. They needed to be grotesque, readable, and weirdly satisfying. Too quick, and fans feel robbed. Too realistic, and the tone becomes miserable. Too cartoonish, and the danger disappears. The film often lands in that sweet, ugly zone where the body horror is excessive but still staged like a punchline. Kung Lao's fatality is the clearest example. It is absurd. It is disgusting. It is also exactly the kind of moment people came to see. The production does not apologize for it, and that confidence matters. The environments also shaped the physical work. Raiden's temple, the training spaces, the cage fighting scenes, the frozen confrontations, each location demanded different movement. Cage fights are close and blunt. Temple training has more formal spacing. Sub-Zero's attacks often use environment as weapon, turning walls, floors, and air itself into extensions of his body. That required coordination between set design, stunt planning, camera placement, and effects timing. In a movie like this, no department can operate alone. If the stunt beat does not match the VFX plan, the illusion breaks. If the camera misses the movement, the effort disappears. Then came the release journey, which became its own battle. Mortal Kombat was originally positioned as a theatrical franchise reboot, but the COVID-era distribution landscape changed everything. Warner Bros. Released it internationally on April 8, 2021, and in the United States on April 23, 2021, with a simultaneous theatrical and HBO Max release in premium formats including Dolby Cinema, IMAX, and 4DX. That hybrid release shaped how people experienced the film. Some saw the blood and ice on a giant screen. Others watched fatalities from a couch. Same movie, completely different impact. That matters because Mortal Kombat is built for crowd reaction. Fatalities want noise. Kano jokes want laughter bouncing around a room. The Scorpion and Sub-Zero showdown wants a theater full of people recognizing iconography at the same time. The HBO Max release gave the film huge accessibility, but it also split the ritual. A movie designed like a midnight crowd pleaser entered the world during a moment when crowds were complicated. That is not a small footnote. It is part of the film's identity. Commercially, the film carried that pandemic asterisk everywhere. It had a reported production budget around $55 million and grossed over $84 million worldwide, while also becoming a major HBO Max performer. In ordinary conditions, those numbers would tell one story. In 2021, they tell another. The box office was not just measuring interest. It was measuring public comfort, theater availability, streaming competition, and Warner's day-and-date strategy. For a reboot trying to prove franchise viability, survival itself became part of the achievement. Behind the scenes, the biggest accomplishment is that Mortal Kombat feels like a film made by people trying to respect the absurdity rather than sand it down. Nobody can make this material realistic in the traditional sense. That would be a mistake. The production challenge was different. Make the ridiculous feel tactile. Make the blood wet, the ice sharp, the fire hot, the punches heavy, the costumes wearable, and the mythology just grounded enough that audiences accept the madness. And that is where the production journey earns respect. Not every choice works. Some characters needed more time. Some realms needed more scale. Some effects needed more polish. But the movie never feels embarrassed by its source. The cast trains, sweats, fights, falls, and commits. The crew builds a world where ancient rivalries can smash into modern action filmmaking without collapsing into parody. Mortal Kombat may be messy, but it is not lazy. You can feel the labor in the bruises. And once the bruises reached audiences, the next fight began. Not in temples or frozen warehouses, but in numbers. Box office totals, streaming performance, pandemic release strategy, franchise expectations, and the difficult question every studio had to ask. Did Mortal Kombat hit hard enough to justify another round? The commercial story of Mortal Kombat is not clean enough to judge by box office alone. In a normal year, the conversation would be simple. Budget, opening weekend, domestic total, international total, profit, or disappointment. But 2021 was not normal. The film entered theaters during the COVID-era hybrid release experiment, which means every number comes with an invisible opponent standing behind it. Theater hesitation, capacity limits, streaming availability, piracy, Warner Brothers putting its entire 2021 slate into a day-and-date model. Mortal Kombat did not just fight Outworld, it fought the distribution model of its own release year. On paper, the film cost about $55 million to produce, which is lean for a modern effects-heavy franchise reboot. That number matters. Mortal Kombat has monsters, magic, realm mythology, digital gore, elaborate costumes, martial arts choreography, and recognizable IP expectations. A $55 million budget means the production had enough money to look theatrical, but not enough to behave like a Marvel-sized machine. Every dollar had to stretch. The final worldwide gross was about $84.4 million, with roughly $42.3 million domestic and $42.1 million internationally. Pure theatrical math makes that look modest. Pandemic math makes it more complicated. The domestic opening weekend tells the real story better than the final total. Mortal Kombat opened to $23.3 million from 3,073 theaters in North America, topping the box office in late April 2021. That is not a small debut for an R-rated video game adaptation released simultaneously at home. In fact, the opening showed that audience interest was absolutely there. People wanted this movie. The brand still had heat. The fatalities still had cultural pull. The trailer had done its job. The Scorpion-Sub-Zero rivalry had done its job. Even Cole Young, controversial as a new lead, did not stop fans from showing up early. Then came the drop. The film's domestic multiplier was only 1.82, meaning its total domestic gross was less than twice its opening weekend. That is not strong theatrical legs. It suggests the movie burned through its core audience fast, then struggled to keep casual viewers returning. But again, context matters. When a movie is available on HBO Max the same day it opens in theaters, repeat theatrical viewing becomes a harder sell. Why buy another ticket when the film is sitting at home? Why organize a second trip when the living room version is already waiting? The weak legs reveal something about audience behavior as much as audience satisfaction. The HBO Max side is where the movie starts looking less like a theatrical underperformer and more like a franchise validator. Samba TV reported that Mortal Kombat drew 3.8 million U.S. households over its first weekend on HBO Max, calling it the service's most viewed weekend premiere at that point. That number changed the meaning of the release. Theaters told one story: solid opening, fast fade, limited global ceiling. Streaming told another: massive immediate curiosity, strong at-home engagement, and proof that the property could drive subscribers and conversation. For Warner Brothers, that mattered. Maybe more than the box office. This is where Mortal Kombat becomes a fascinating case study in modern franchise economics. A film can look merely okay theatrically and still become valuable if it dominates streaming attention. That was especially true in 2021, when studios were measuring success with multiple scoreboards at once. Ticket sales mattered, yes, But so did subscriber retention, app engagement, social chatter, and whether a movie could make HBO Max feel like an event platform. Mortal Kombat did that. It gave the service exactly what streaming wants: a loud, recognizable, meme-friendly title people watched immediately. Internationally, the film's performance was restrained but not irrelevant. About half of its worldwide gross came from outside North America, which shows the brand had global appeal but not explosive breakout power under those conditions. Action and fighting game iconography usually travel well because movement, spectacle, and visual mythology cross language barriers. But the pandemic release environment disrupted that potential. Different markets had different theater restrictions, different reopening rhythms, and different audience comfort levels. So the international number tells us less about the franchise's ceiling and more about how fragmented the marketplace still was in April 2021. Compared with the older Mortal Kombat films, the reboot's numbers sit in an odd place. The 1995 movie became a theatrical hit for its era, while 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation damaged the brand's cinematic reputation badly. The 2021 version did not become a box office knockout, but it did something maybe more important. It restored enough confidence for continuation. It proved the franchise could survive live action again. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. That is the business victory hiding beneath the modest gross. Merchandising and brand awareness also matter here, even if they are harder to quantify from public data. Mortal Kombat is not just a movie title. It is a gaming institution. A film release can support game sales, streaming interest, social media circulation, character recognition, and franchise momentum beyond ticket revenue. When fans share fatalities online, argue about casting, debate Johnny Cage's absence, or replay the Scorpion Sub-Zero opening, the movie keeps functioning as marketing for the larger brand ecosystem. In franchise terms, cultural noise has value. The R rating shaped the commercial ceiling too. This was the correct creative choice. A bloodless Mortal Kombat is basically false advertising. But R-rated action generally narrows theatrical audience access compared with PG-13 blockbusters. The film chose authenticity over maximum demographic reach, and that choice made business sense because fan trust was the real asset. A safer PG-13 version might have opened wider in theory, but it could have lost the exact audience most likely to evangelize the reboot. Sometimes the smarter financial move is not chasing everyone. It is satisfying the people who care most. Profitability remains difficult to assess from theatrical gross alone because marketing costs, streaming value, licensing, and home entertainment revenue are not fully visible. The old rule of thumb says a movie must earn roughly 2 to 2.5 times its production budget theatrically to be safe, and Mortal Kombat did not reach that benchmark from box office alone. But that rule becomes less reliable when a studio deliberately sacrifices theatrical exclusivity to feed a streaming platform. The film's financial meaning cannot be separated from Warner's strategy. It was not only selling tickets, it was selling HBO Max as a destination. The most revealing outcome is what happened after. The franchise continued. Studios do not greenlight follow-ups out of sentiment. They respond to evidence, audience demand, streaming performance, brand heat, and perceived upside. Mortal Kombat delivered enough evidence. It may not have dominated the global box office, but it proved there was still an audience hungry for this world in live action. That is why its commercial impact is bigger than its theatrical total suggests. So the box office verdict is complicated but not negative. Mortal Kombat was not a clean theatrical smash. It was a pandemic-era hybrid success with a bruised theatrical profile and a powerful streaming footprint. It opened strongly, faded quickly, performed modestly worldwide, but landed loudly enough at home to keep the brand alive. For a reboot carrying decades of fan expectation and the baggage of failed cinematic history, that is not a fatality. That is survival. And survival, in franchise filmmaking, is everything. Once the money has spoken, the next question is how critics, fans, and the wider culture responded. Because Mortal Kombat did not just divide Earthrealm and Outworld. It split viewers between those who saw a faithful, bloody crowd pleaser and those who saw a messy screenplay wrapped around a few killer fights. Mortal Kombat landed in that strange reception zone where almost everyone agreed on what worked, almost everyone agreed on what did not, and the final argument became a matter of tolerance. Critics generally saw the same movie: strong opening, committed cast, satisfying flashes of gore, decent visual craft, and a screenplay that kept tripping over exposition. Rotten Tomatoes places the film around the middle of the road critically, while audience response has been much warmer, a gap that tells you almost everything about how this reboot functioned. Critics judged it as a film. Fans judged it as Mortal Kombat finally being allowed to spill blood properly. That split makes sense. For critics coming in cold, the film's biggest weakness is structure. The story spends so much time explaining marks, arcana, realms, champions, and destiny that the actual tournament, the thing most casual viewers associate with Mortal Kombat, never truly happens. That absence became one of the loudest complaints around the movie. You can feel the film building toward an event it keeps delaying, then replacing it with scattered pre-tournament battles. For some viewers, that felt like clever franchise setup. For others, it felt like ordering the main course and being served appetizers with extra blood. The most repeated critical praise centered on the opening sequence. And honestly, fair. That prologue is the movie at its most disciplined. Emotional, visually clean, mythic without being over-explained. Roger Ebert. Com's review argued that the opening fight was so strong that much of what followed felt disappointing by comparison, especially once the movie settled into training room exposition and destiny talk. That criticism stings because it is accurate. The first 10 minutes promise a tragedy-driven martial arts epic. The middle often becomes a lore tutorial with occasional fatalities. Cole Young became the lightning rod. Fans did not reject Louis Tan's physical commitment so much as the idea of creating an original lead when the game roster already had beloved characters waiting for screen time. That is the dangerous thing about adapting a franchise with decades of fan investment. Every minute spent on a new character feels stolen from someone iconic. Liu Kang could have led this. Sonya could have led this. Johnny Cage's absence became a running complaint before the sequel tease even arrived. Cole was designed as a newcomer's doorway into the mythology, but to many fans, he felt like a hallway blocking the better rooms. And yet the audience response was not hostile overall. Far from it. Viewers who came for fights, fatalities, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Kano's trash mouth, and recognizable game references often had a good time. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes has remained far higher than the critic score, reflecting a fanbase more willing to forgive clunky plotting if the movie delivered enough franchise flavor. That is the key difference. Critics looked at dead narrative space, fans looked at Kung Lao's fatality and said, yes, that, more of that. Josh Lawson's Kano became one of the safest points of agreement. Even people who disliked the movie often admitted Kano gave it oxygen. His vulgarity, timing, and shameless self-interest cut through the solemn mythology. He made the film feel less like it was afraid of its own absurdity. That matters because Mortal Kombat should never become too self-serious. This is a franchise where a thunder god supervises martial artists fighting four-armed monsters and soul-eating sorcerers. Kano's presence reminded the movie to have a pulse. The violence also received a complicated but mostly appreciative response. The R rating was celebrated because it signaled that the filmmakers understood the brand's core promise. Fatalities are not optional garnish in Mortal Kombat. They are part of the grammar. Critics who were lukewarm on the story still often acknowledged that the film showed more loyalty to the games than earlier live-action attempts, especially in its willingness to embrace gore and signature moves. The problem was not whether the movie respected the source. It clearly did. The problem was whether respect alone could substitute for dramatic momentum. It could not. Metacritic's reviews captured that mixed attitude sharply, with many critics landing in the some fun, many flaws range. The Hollywood Reporter's review, excerpted by Metacritic, framed it as a B-movie needing more wit and charisma, while noting that modern superhero and action cinema had raised the bar for universe-saving fight movies. That context matters. The 1995 Mortal Kombat could survive partly on novelty. By 2021, audiences had seen the Marvel machine, John Wick precision, the the raid intensity and countless effects-heavy franchise worlds. Being a faithful video game adaptation was no longer enough by itself. The cultural conversation around the film also became more interesting after release because it immediately turned into sequel discourse. Fans debated what needed fixing. Bring in Johnny Cage, center the actual tournament, expand Outworld, deepen Shang Tsung, reduce Cole's importance, give Liu Kang more weight, make the fights bigger. That kind of criticism is different from dismissal. People were not saying, never do this again. They were saying, you are close. Now stop holding back. That is why the movie's reception, despite mixed reviews, still felt commercially useful. It generated a correction list. Recent discussion around Mortal Kombat 2 has only reinforced that reading. Coverage of the sequel has repeatedly framed it as addressing fan complaints from the 2021 film, especially the absence of the tournament and Johnny Cage, while producer and franchise co-creator commentary has acknowledged that the follow-up leaned harder into what fans felt was missing the first time. That hindsight makes the 2021 film look less like a failed adaptation and more like a rough first draft of a better franchise formula. So the reception verdict is mixed, but not meaningless. Critics were right about the screenplay problems. Fans were right about the visceral pleasures. The film has a killer opening, memorable villain energy from Sub-Zero, tragic grandeur from Scorpion, a scene-stealing Kano, and enough blood-soaked iconography to justify its existence. It also has a flat protagonist problem, an undercooked tournament structure, and a mythology that sometimes explains itself instead of dramatizing itself. That tension is why Mortal Kombat remains fascinating. It is not a great film, but it is a revealing one. It shows how far video game adaptations had come by 2021 and how far they still needed to go. It proved that faithfulness matters, but faithfulness without strong story architecture can only carry you so far. The audience did not reject the universe. They wanted more of it, just sharper, stranger, bigger, and less hesitant. And that leads directly into the final question. Beyond the blood, the fan service, and the mixed reviews, what does Mortal Kombat actually mean as a modern franchise reboot? And what legacy does it leave behind? Mortal Kombat is, at its core, a story about inheritance. Not subtle inheritance. Not quiet family drama inheritance. This is inheritance written in blood, frozen into revenge, burned into flesh, and stamped onto chosen bodies through dragon markings. The film's deepest idea is not really the tournament, because the tournament barely arrives. It is legacy. Who receives power, who deserves it, who abuses it, and who gets crushed beneath histories they did not choose. That theme is why the Scorpion Sub-Zero material hits harder than almost anything else in the film. Their conflict feels ancient because it is personal before it becomes myth. The opening sequence understands legacy better than the rest of the movie sometimes does. Hanzo Hasashi is not introduced as an icon, mascot, or fan service machine. He is a husband and father whose bloodline becomes the target of extermination. By-hand's violence is not random villainy. It is the attempt to erase a lineage. That gives Scorpion's eventual return emotional power. Revenge in Mortal Kombat is not treated as clean heroism. It is grief that has survived too long. When Hanzo becomes Scorpion, he is not healed. He is weaponized pain. That is darker and much more interesting. Cole Young's arc mirrors that idea from the opposite direction. He inherits a legacy he does not understand. That can be compelling, because many people live under the weight of names, families, cultures, and histories they did not personally build. Cole is told who he is before he feels it himself. The problem is that the film sometimes treats this discovery too mechanically. Dragon Mark, training, arcana, power unlock. The emotional concept is strong, but the dramatic execution is uneven. We understand what Cole represents, but we do not always feel the full spiritual shock of him realizing it. Still, his family angle gives the theme a human anchor. Cole's power emerges from protection, not ambition. That matters. He is not chasing glory, rank, or cosmic importance. He wants his wife and daughter to survive. In a franchise full of gods, monsters, assassins, and champions, that ordinary desire gives the movie its most relatable emotional line. The armor he develops is a little visually awkward, yes, but symbolically it fits. He becomes someone who absorbs punishment and redirects it, a fighter shaped by endurance. a protector whose strength comes from taking hits and staying upright. Sonya Blade's story adds another angle: destiny versus earned worth. She spends much of the film outside the official chosen system, despite being one of the most prepared people in the room. She has done the research, taken the risks, built the case, and trained herself into readiness. But because she lacks the mark, the mythology excludes her. That frustration is one of the film's sharper ideas. Sonya's journey argues that worth is not always recognized by the institutions that claim to measure it. Sometimes destiny is late. Sometimes bureaucracy wears divine clothing. Jax's arc turns identity into body horror. His arms are not just injured, his sense of self is attacked. For a soldier, for a fighter, for a man whose confidence is tied to physical capability, the loss is existential. His eventual transformation works because it turns trauma into function without pretending the trauma vanished. The metal arms are not just cool franchise iconography. They are survival made visible. Mortal Kombat is often ridiculous. But in Jax's best moments, the movie finds something honest. Power can come from rebuilding, but rebuilding still begins with being broken. Kano is the film's counter-theme. If the heroes wrestle with responsibility, Kano represents power without responsibility. He receives supernatural ability and instantly becomes worse. Perfect. His arcana does not elevate him. It exposes him. That is why his betrayal feels thematically correct. Mortal Kombat is full of chosen fighters, but being chosen does not make someone noble. The mark can identify power, but it cannot create character. Kano proves the universe has a screening problem. Destiny may select champions, but it clearly does not run background checks. The film also plays with the tension between faithfulness and reinvention, and that becomes part of its legacy outside the story. As a reboot, Mortal Kombat had to answer a brutal question: how much of the game should survive translation into cinema? The 2021 film's answer is clear. Keep the fatalities, the signature moves, the iconography, the realm conflict, the names fans chant in their heads before the actors even appear. Do not apologize for the absurdity. That choice gives the movie integrity. It may stumble structurally, but it rarely feels ashamed of being Mortal Kombat. That is important because video game adaptations spent decades either misunderstanding their source material or sanding it down into generic action. This film does not make that mistake. Its flaws come from construction, not contempt. It wants to honor the games. You feel that in Kung Lao's fatality, Sub-Zero's ice weapons, Scorpion's chain, Liu Kang's fire, Jax's arms, Kano's vulgarity, and the final tease of Johnny Cage. The movie knows what fans came to see. The bigger issue is that knowing the ingredients is not the same as cooking the perfect meal. The absence of the actual tournament remains the film's strangest legacy choice. It is bold, maybe too bold, to make a Mortal Kombat movie that functions as prelude rather than event. On one hand, that creates room for origin stories and franchise setup. On the other hand, it denies the movie the clean dramatic structure the title naturally promises. The tournament is not just a plot device. It is the organizing principle of the brand. Without it, the film has to invent momentum through scattered confrontations. Some work. Some feel like placeholders. The sequel conversation practically writes itself. Next time, give us the arena. As a final verdict, Mortal Kombat is a flawed but valuable reboot. It is too rushed in places, too thin in others, and too dependent on future installments to complete ideas this film should have handled more fully. Shang Tsung needs more menace. Liu Kang deserves more centrality. Cole needs sharper writing. Outworld needs greater scale. The mythology needs to be dramatized instead of explained. These are real problems. They matter. But the movie also gives us a ferocious opening. A terrifying Sub-Zero, a mournful Scorpion, a hilarious Kano, legible action, satisfying gore, and a tone that finally understands why this franchise has lasted. Its legacy is not greatness. Its legacy is permission. Permission for Mortal Kombat to be bloody again. Permission for video game adaptations to lean into weirdness instead of hiding from it. Permission for a sequel to go bigger, stranger, and more tournament-focused because the groundwork has already been laid. The 2021 film is not the flawless champion Earthrealm deserved, but it is the bruised fighter that got back in the cage and proved the franchise still had a pulse. And in Mortal Kombat, survival is never passive. Survival is the first victory before the real fight begins. The final tease of Johnny Cage is more than a sequel hook. It is the film quietly admitting what it held back. After spending 2 hours building Earthrealm's new champions, introducing Arcana, reviving Scorpion's legend, and positioning Shang Tsung as the larger threat, Mortal Kombat ends by pointing toward the one character whose absence fans felt from the beginning. Johnny Cage is not just another fighter. He is the franchise's ego, comic relief, Hollywood satire, and audience surrogate all rolled into one arrogant pair of sunglasses. Leaving him out of the 2021 film was a risky choice. Teasing him at the end was the apology and the promise. That tease works because Johnny Cage represents exactly what the reboot sometimes lacked: personality at full volume. Cole Young gives the audience a grounded entry point, but Johnny would have given the story a louder emotional engine. He is ridiculous in a way Mortal Kombat needs. A movie star walking into a war between realms is absurd, but that absurdity is the point. The franchise has always thrived on tonal collision: ninjas, gods, soldiers, monsters, monks, actors, assassins, and sorcerers all thrown into the same violent mythology. Johnny Cage makes that collision self-aware without turning it into parody. His arrival also creates a chance to correct the ensemble balance. The first film leans heavily on setup, explaining the rules of the world through Cole's confusion. A sequel with Johnny Cage can shift that function into comedy. He can ask the obvious questions, mock the mythology, misunderstand everything, and still gradually earn his place as a real fighter. That gives exposition energy. Instead of characters standing around explaining realms and champions, Johnny can push against the information, turning lore into conflict. That is how you make world-building feel alive. The tease also signals a tonal expansion. Mortal Kombat 2021 is grimy, violent, and serious, sometimes too serious for its own good. Kano helps break that stiffness, but once he turns villainous, the heroes lose their strongest comic disruptor. Johnny Cage could fill that gap from the heroic side, not by copying Kano's vulgar chaos, but by bringing vanity, insecurity, performative confidence, and show business absurdity into the team. He should be funny, yes, but the best version of Johnny is not a joke machine. He is a man pretending to be shallow because sincerity terrifies him. That emotional angle matters. Johnny Cage works when the arrogance is armor. Beneath the fame, the sunglasses, the movie star attitude, and the punchlines, there should be someone desperate to prove he is not just a manufactured celebrity. That makes him a perfect thematic fit for this version of Mortal Kombat. Cole wrestles with inherited legacy. Sonya fights to prove earned worth. Jax rebuilds identity after physical trauma. Johnny could explore public image versus real courage. What happens when someone famous for fake heroism is asked to become an actual hero? That question has real dramatic bite. The sequel setup also gives Scorpion and Sub-Zero's legacy room to evolve. The 2021 film ends with Scorpion's revenge fulfilled, but Mortal Kombat lore rarely lets vengeance rest peacefully. By-Hand's death opens the door to Noob Saibot, one of the franchise's darker possibilities. That is not just a monster upgrade. It is a chance to twist the first film's emotional victory into something more disturbing. If Sub-Zero returns in corrupted form, then Hanzo's revenge did not end the curse. It deepened it. That would make the mythology feel less like a checklist and more like consequence. Shang Tsung's final warning also matters because it reframes the entire first movie as a prelude. He leaves defeated but not broken, promising that death is only another doorway in this universe. That line is pure franchise logic, but it also gives the sequel permission to go bigger. The first film kept Outworld mostly in the shadows. The next chapter has to stop hiding it. Shang Tsung cannot just hover and threaten. He needs to manipulate, seduce, corrupt, bargain, and terrify. He should feel less like a boss waiting at the edge of the map and more like a political force shaping the game before anyone enters the arena. The biggest sequel promise, though, is the tournament itself. The 2021 film delays the central event, which makes the ending feel like a doorway rather than a destination. That can frustrate viewers, but it also creates expectation. The next story has no excuse. The pieces are on the board. Earthrealm has champions. Outworld has enemies. Raiden has drawn his line. Shang Tsung has made his threat. Johnny Cage is waiting in Hollywood. The tournament must become the spine, not the reward saved for later. Mortal Kombat needs the arena because the arena gives the chaos shape, and that shape would allow the franchise to deepen character conflict naturally. A proper tournament structure creates matchups with meaning: Sonya against enemies who underestimate her, Jax against fighters who force him to trust his reconstructed body, Liu Kang against opponents who test faith, Johnny against someone who exposes his vanity, Cole against a legacy he still does not fully understand. Fights should not exist only because the audience wants fatalities. They should answer character questions. Who breaks under pressure? Who adapts? Who cheats? Who discovers they were never ready? That is the real opportunity hidden in the ending. Mortal Kombat 2021 sets the table unevenly, but the table is set. The reboot establishes tone, rules, blood, and myth. It proves that this universe can exist in modern live action without becoming embarrassed by itself. Now the sequel has to do the harder thing: turn potential into structure. Bigger fights are not enough. More characters are not enough. More fatalities are not enough. The next chapter has to understand why each fight matters before the first punch lands. So yes, the Johnny Cage tease is fan service, absolutely. But it is also a creative diagnosis. It tells us what the first film saved, what it missed, and what the franchise needs next. More charisma, more tournament energy, more theatricality, more emotional contrast, and a stronger bridge between absurdity and sincerity. Mortal Kombat survives because it knows how to be ridiculous and iconic at the same time. Johnny Cage might be the character best built to carry that contradiction, and if the first film was about proving Mortal Kombat could bleed again, the next stage is about proving it can evolve, not by abandoning the gore, the catchphrases, the costumes, or the mythic nonsense fans love, but by arranging them into a sharper dramatic machine. The pieces are already dangerous. Now the franchise has to learn how to make them lethal. The future of Mortal Kombat depends on one uncomfortable truth. The franchise cannot survive on recognition alone. Recognition got the 2021 film attention. Recognition made Sub-Zero's mask matter before he spoke. Recognition made Scorpion's chain feel iconic before it flew. Recognition made fans cheer when Kung Lao's hat became a horror device. But recognition is the invitation, not the meal. The next stage has to prove that these characters can carry drama, not just nostalgia. Mortal Kombat 2, or any continuation, must understand that fan service gets applause, but character consequence creates memory. The first thing the sequel must fix is structure. No more long prelude pretending to be the main event. The tournament has to arrive, and it has to shape the story from beginning to end. A tournament is useful because it creates natural suspense. Brackets, matchups, eliminations, rivalries, cheating, injuries, momentum shifts. These are built-in dramatic engines. The 2021 film often had to invent reasons for fights to happen. A proper tournament solves that. It gives every fight a place, every victory a cost, every loss a consequence. The arena should not be background decoration. It should be the movie's heartbeat. But a tournament alone is not enough. The fights need emotional design. The weakest version of Mortal Kombat 2 would simply throw characters at each other because fans recognize the names. That is not storytelling. That is roster management. The stronger version asks, why this opponent at this moment against this fighter? Sonya should face someone who challenges her legitimacy. Jax should face someone who forces him to confront what his new body can and cannot do. Liu Kang should be tested spiritually, not just physically. Johnny Cage should be humiliated before he is heroic. Cole, if he remains central, should face the burden of being connected to Scorpion without becoming a shadow of him. Johnny Cage is the biggest opportunity and the biggest risk. Play him too broadly, and he becomes exhausting. Play him too sincerely too soon, and he loses the comic arrogance that makes him useful. The trick is contradiction. He should be funny because he is insecure, arrogant because he is afraid of being ordinary, and brave before he fully understands why. The sequel should let him enter as a joke, and leave as someone who has earned the right to stand beside warriors who once dismissed him. That arc can give the film humor without sacrificing stakes. The sequel also needs to deepen Liu Kang. In the games, Liu Kang is not just another fighter. He is one of the franchise's spiritual centers. The 2021 film gives him discipline and warmth, but not enough dramatic weight. A continuation should position him as more than a trainer or supporting monk. He should carry moral pressure. He should struggle with belief, destiny, rage, and the cost of being expected to win. Perfect heroes are boring. Liu Kang becomes compelling when faith has to survive fear. Let him doubt. Let him burn too hot. Let the fire mean something. Shang Tsung must become more dangerous through intelligence, not just threat delivery. In the first film, he looks powerful, speaks ominously, and commands monsters, but he rarely feels like he is outsmarting everyone. That has to change. A soul-stealing sorcerer should be seductive, strategic, and terrifyingly patient. He should understand the weaknesses of each champion before the fights begin. He should tempt Kano types, manipulate insecure fighters, exploit grief, and turn rules into weapons. The best villains do not only attack bodies, they attack identity. Shang Tsung should make every hero wonder whether their strength is also their trap. Outworld also needs scale. The first film suggests corruption, but the sequel should let us feel civilization under tyranny. Show arenas. Show courts. Show warriors afraid of failing. Show how Shang Tsung's rule or influence poisons everything beneath him. Outworld should not just be a dark place where villains stand between fights. It should feel like a culture built around conquest, status, and survival. The audience needs to understand what Earthrealm is up against beyond Bad Realm wants to win. Give evil architecture. Give it politics. Give it hunger. The action must evolve too. More gore is not automatically better. The first film proved it could do fatalities. The sequel has to make them matter. A fatality should be a dramatic period at the end of a sentence, not a random splash of red ink. Kung Lao's fatality worked because it had build-up, absurdity, and release. Future kills need that same shape. Let the audience understand the move before it lands. Let the geography be clear. Let the camera hold long enough for the impact to register. Brutality without rhythm becomes noise. Mortal Kombat needs rhythm. The sequel should also be less afraid of theatricality. The 2021 film grounded the world to make it accessible, but the next film can afford to open the gates wider. Give us stranger realms, more stylized arenas, more impossible silhouettes, more ritual, more color, more myth. Mortal Kombat should feel dangerous, but it should also feel grand. The franchise is not just blood in dark rooms. It is fire against ice, gods above mortals, monsters under banners, warriors entering arenas like legends walking into murals. Let the imagery breathe. Cole Young remains the trickiest piece. Removing him entirely could feel abrupt after the first film built so much around him. Keeping him too central could frustrate fans who want legacy characters foregrounded. The solution is recalibration. Cole should not dominate the sequel. He should serve the ensemble, carrying the Scorpion bloodline thread, while allowing Johnny, Liu Kang, Sonya, Jax, and the tournament itself to take greater dramatic space. Use him as connective tissue, not the whole skeleton. That would honor the first film without repeating its biggest imbalance. Sonya deserves a stronger arc now that she has the mark. Her first film frustration came from being excluded despite doing the work. The sequel should ask what happens after recognition arrives. Does power change her? Does being chosen validate her or complicate her? Does she become more confident, or does she fear she must constantly prove the mark was not accidental? That is a real character question. The best sequels do not simply upgrade abilities, they complicate victories. Jax, too, should move beyond the origin of his arms. The first film gave him trauma and recovery. The next should explore control. His body is now partly weapon, partly wound, partly miracle. What does that do to a soldier's sense of self? Is he stronger, or does he feel less human? Does he embrace the metal, resent it, depend on it, fear it? Those questions can give his action scenes emotional texture. When he punches through an enemy, the scene should carry both satisfaction and unease. The franchise's long-term potential is enormous because Mortal Kombat has something many cinematic universes struggle to create: instantly readable identities. You see the silhouette, and you know the character. Hat, chain, ice mask, metal arms, sunglasses, fire hands, bladed fans, that visual clarity is gold. But cinema needs more than silhouettes. It needs scenes, choices, regrets, bonds, betrayals. The next films must turn icons into people without sanding away what makes them iconic. That is the path forward. Sharper structure, deeper character stakes, bolder realms, smarter villainy, and fights that reveal psychology rather than simply interrupting dialogue. The 2021 film gave the franchise permission to return. The sequel has to justify staying. It cannot merely say, "Remember this?" It has to say, "Now watch what this means." Because Mortal Kombat is not lacking pieces. It has too many pieces. The danger is clutter. The opportunity is orchestration. Arrange the fighters correctly. Give each battle emotional purpose. Let the mythology expand without drowning the characters. And this franchise can become more than a guilty pleasure bloodbath. It can become a truly distinctive fantasy action saga. Messy, brutal, operatic, funny, tragic, and proudly strange. The first film survived. The next one must conquer. The final expanded legacy of Mortal Kombat 2021 is not that it solved the video game movie curse. That conversation had already become more complicated by the time this film arrived. Its legacy is more specific, and maybe more valuable. It proved that a live-action Mortal Kombat movie could stop apologizing for being Mortal Kombat. For years, adaptations of games often carried a strange embarrassment, as if the filmmakers wanted the brand recognition, but not the weirdness that made the brand popular. This film does not have that shame. It says the names. It shows the blood. It lets a razor hat split a body. It lets a ninja from hell yell the line. That matters. But confidence is not the same as completeness. The film is a foundation, not a fully built temple. You can feel the scaffolding everywhere. Cole's introduction, the arcana system, Raiden gathering champions, Shang Tsung circling from the edges, Johnny Cage saved for later, the tournament delayed like a weapon being kept in the drawer. Some viewers saw that and felt cheated. Fair. Others saw it as setup. Also fair. The truth sits between them. Mortal Kombat 2021 is a movie constantly preparing for the movie fans thought they were getting. That is why its legacy feels unfinished in a strangely compelling way. It is not remembered as a clean triumph, but as a promise with blood on its hands. The opening gives us the film it could have been: tragic, patient, mythic, emotionally precise. The middle gives us the film it often is: exposition-heavy, entertaining, uneven, carried by strong moments rather than flawless structure. The ending gives us the film it wants to become: bigger, louder, more tournament-driven, more faithful to the full shape of the franchise. It is a movie split between origin story and main event, and the origin story keeps winning the argument. Yet the film's strongest images endure. Hanzo finding his family destroyed, Sub-Zero freezing blood into a blade, Jax staring at the ruin of his arms, Kung Lao lowering his hat into pure grindhouse madness, Kano talking himself into and out of danger with the same filthy confidence, Scorpion stepping through fire like revenge has finally found a body again. These moments stick because they understand the franchise at a primal level. Mortal Kombat is not elegant. It is not subtle. It is a mythology of impact. Pain becomes identity. Power becomes performance. Violence becomes language. That language is why the film connects even when the screenplay stumbles. Fans are not wrong to defend it. They are responding to recognition that feels genuine. The movie knows Sub-Zero should be terrifying, not just cool. It knows Scorpion's rage needs grief under it. It knows Kano should be unbearable and funny. It knows fatalities are not optional. It knows the tone should live somewhere between martial arts fantasy, horror splatter, superhero origin, and arcade fever dream. That mixture is absurd, but it is the brand. Sanding it down would have been worse than failing loudly. At the same time, critics were not wrong either. The movie's dramatic architecture is shaky. Cole Young is thematically useful but not always dramatically electric. Liu Kang and Shang Tsung are underused. Outworld feels smaller than it should. Raiden is more exposition machine than divine presence. The absence of the actual tournament creates a structural hole no amount of gore can fully cover. These flaws matter because they limit the emotional ceiling. Mortal Kombat 2021 entertains, but it rarely overwhelms after the prologue. It has bursts of greatness, not sustained greatness. And maybe that is why people keep talking about it. Perfect movies do not always generate the most interesting franchise conversations. Flawed movies with obvious potential do. Mortal Kombat became a checklist of what worked and what needed fixing. Keep the R rating. Keep the physical fight clarity. Keep the elemental iconography. Keep the serious treatment of Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Keep Kano-level personality. Fix the structure. Center the tournament. Expand the realms. Give Liu Kang weight. Make Shang Tsung dangerous through manipulation. Bring in Johnny Cage. Let the weirdness breathe. That kind of response is valuable because it means the audience still cares. Indifference kills franchises faster than criticism. Mortal Kombat 2021 did not create indifference. It created arguments, the productive kind. Fans debated Cole, Johnny, arcana, fatalities, lore changes, casting, pacing, and sequel direction because they saw something alive under the unevenness. They were not mourning a dead adaptation. They were trying to coach a fighter between rounds. That is the best metaphor for the film itself. Bruised, flawed, still standing, listening from the corner while the crowd yells what it needs to do next. As a piece of franchise history, it also helped confirm that video game adaptations no longer needed to chase respectability by rejecting their origins. The path forward was not to make game movies less game-like. The path was to understand what made the game emotionally and visually powerful, then translate that into cinematic structure. Mortal Kombat gets half of that equation right. It understands the iconography. It understands the visceral promise. It understands the fan contract. Where it struggles is structure, pacing, and character distribution. The sequel's job is not to reinvent the identity. It is to discipline it. That distinction is everything. Mortal Kombat should never become generic prestige fantasy. It should not be sanitized into bland mythology or buried under self-serious world-building. It should be violent, colorful, ridiculous, dramatic, and occasionally funny in ways that feel almost illegal. But the chaos needs shape. The blood needs consequence. The tournament needs stakes beyond good realm versus bad realm. The characters need desires that collide before their fists do. Once those pieces align, the franchise could become something genuinely special in modern action cinema. So the expanded final verdict is this. Mortal Kombat 2021 is not a flawless victory. It is a necessary victory. It wins by surviving the expectations placed on it, by restoring the franchise's cinematic pulse, and by proving that fans would still show up for this world if the filmmakers treated it with enough blood-soaked sincerity. It loses points for hesitation, thin characterization, and saving too much for later. But it earns respect for commitment. It does not laugh at Mortal Kombat from the outside. It steps into the arena, takes the hit, and fights like it belongs there. And that is why its legacy will likely age better than its reviews suggested. Not because every scene works, not because every creative risk pays off, but because it reopened the gate. It reminded audiences that this universe still has heat, still has teeth, still has characters worth watching, and still has unfinished business. The film ends looking toward Johnny Cage, but its real final message is bigger than one character. The tournament is coming, the mythology is expanding, the first round was messy. But the fight is not over.